Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructive Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by my co hosts, a man without a wide angle camera, Matt Kling,
Hey, how's it going?
and Michael Hinderocker.
What's up?
You know what's funny is the worst part about all of this is if I could just make Matt's head appear on a separate screen, on a separate Skype call, I could make it fit. I could make it
Man,
fit, Michael.
how big is my head that we need a whole screen for
It's
it?
the hair, man. It's the hair. But we have made a promise to listeners that we're going back to these fully edited, fully produced Magic the Gathering podcasts. Going back means one thing and one thing only, Matt Kling, and that's that sound. It's official. We're back. This is OG constructive criticism now. But
Is
also,
that because you can edit it out?
no, that's just the sound on the show. But I think Matt Kling is lost.
No, I'm not lost. I didn't understand the sound. I was trying to figure it out.
It was a can.
Okay.
We used to do that at the beginning of every episode, like in episode 1. Don't you remember?
No, I don't remember this at all.
Oh, I do.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
I feel like the proof is not even on the internet anymore, so it's probably lost to the ether because those episodes just don't exist anymore.
Yeah, I offered Matt to let us do a brainstorm episode again, and he said we wouldn't have enough time. But you know who does have enough time is our sponsors of Oasis Games. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 4% off of every order by using the code Would That Be Good. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code Would That Be Good, or no, CCMTG at checkout. I almost messed it up. I've been doing this for like 300 episodes, so. But you know who won't mess up their plug is our other sponsor at the Mana Base. The Mana Base has everything you need when it comes to content. You know, whether it's Merfolk Master, Mason Slayer Nigachu, or Austin telling you about Arena. There are so many up-and-coming content creators on there. We highly recommend you check them out. Or if you're just looking for a playmat or sleeves, you can check out Ink Gaming. Use the code CCMTG10. Get a little bit off your order. Give us a kickback. It's really appreciated. Thank you so much to all of our sponsors. We really appreciate them. If you want to support the show directly, you can go to patreon.com/ccmtg, become a patron of the show. And you can check out the rest of the network, whether it's Constructive Criticism, Limited Time Only. By the way, this is Constructive Criticism. Or Common Knowledge. There are so many different things that we have going on at constructivecriticism.com, and we highly recommend you check it out. This week is the Pro Tour episode, but we're not doing a reaction episode this week. Matt Kling inspired me to write a whole new show for this week. So, this is the everything you need to know about Pro Tour 25th anniversary episode. So, we're going to just... This is going to be a long show, guys, and it's all Matt Kling's fault, so you can thank him. With that being said, the point of the show is to be getting better. Hopefully Matt Kling made this better by pointing out some fun stuff about the show, notes or lack thereof. That being said, Michael, you know, Hashtag Always Improving is something we discussed last week. Did you find time this week to think about Hashtag Always Improving and how you could improve at Magic?
Well, I spent a bunch of my weekend watching people a lot better than I am play Magic, and I was probably most impressed with all the camera time for both Josh Utter-Layton and I think Mattia Ricci was in the feature match area at one point for like 3 rounds in a row and won all of them, and pretty much the vast majority of his games involved navigating out of some really tight spots. So just coming to watch players who are really good and just like watch gameplay. It's really fun to just watch actually great players.
Yeah, I tweeted out and posted to Facebook a comment about, you know, if you're not at the Pro Tour, you don't have a stake in, you know, talking about people's plays or stuff like that. And people kind of were upset with me for saying that. But, you know, I think that what I'm really always trying to say is don't take coverage as an opportunity to correct people and prove how smart you are. You're not the one at this event with things on the line, and you are the one with perfect information. Instead, think about what they're thinking about and learn from them, because these are some amazing Magic players And my always improving is I had 2 this week, and you knocked one of mine right out of the park. Like, watching Josh Layton navigate games this weekend was kind of masterful and beautiful. I also kind of felt that way about Gregory Orange, to be honest, though. Watching Gregory Orange, I've seen that guy play a lot of Magic, but he was on point this weekend. He played really well. Did you guys get to watch any of his matches?
I watched a couple of them. I've also played against him in the past, and yeah, he's definitely a good Magic player.
Yeah, I haven't gotten the chance to play against him at Grand Prix. We've been to a bunch of Grand Prix together, but I was very impressed with his play specifically on his team. Josh Layton is obviously a master as well. My other always improving moment this week was very much deciding to work with Quentin Pierce for this RPTQ. Quentin and I are pretty good friends, and it's nice to one thing that I don't like about the new RPTQ system is just that I stopped working with my friends for PTQs, and given the fact that we both qualify, that we helped him qualify for this RPTQ, and we did it through preparing together for the last RPTQ. I really enjoyed my time testing with Quentin for the last RPTQ and our conversations, and so I've decided to prepare specifically with him again. And so far, our conversations are great. Like, I know what Quentin's thinking, and he knows what I'm thinking when we send each other deck lists or thoughts, and I really like that. It's something I don't get out of other people that I interact with in Magic very often, and it's really nice where you're like not questioning like what the other person's thinking. You're just like, oh, I see what they were thinking there. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think familiarity is really valuable.
Yeah, and we're working on like a couple of different decks, and it's been really nice so far in just a couple of days. He's given me immediate feedback on the stuff that I'm working on, and immediately is wondering about stuff on his side. So it's pretty sweet. What about you, Matt? What have you done to improve this week in Magic?
Well, mostly just started getting back into the swing of things. I've been playing as much Magic recently, but the Pro Tour really inspired me. I've played, Modern, Legacy, and Standard in the last couple of days pretty heavily, so it's been pretty exciting. I think that, there were some really nice decks to come out of the Pro Tour, so I'm pretty excited to see how it is going forward.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about this Pro Tour. It seems like most people from a viewing experience really enjoyed it. So we don't have any Patreon shoutouts this week, no new patrons this week, but don't forget that if you become a patron of the show, you just always get a shout out. No questions, but I do have an update. Something that LR does that I really like, so I'm blatantly stealing from Marshall, sorry Marshall. I'm going to start, doing we're going to not do it the same way as them because we don't have as many patrons as them, so it's not as easy. But we will be doing a quarterly AMA episode where we'll post for the patrons to just ask us anything, and we'll do an Ask Us Anything episode once a quarter. So if you're a patron of any amount, you'll be able to be that. But if you're a patron of any level now, you can also ask a question of the week. I actually haven't posted the August thread yet, which is why we don't have a question. That's completely my bad. I'm really sorry. I've been busy. But we'll get that up so that we have questions for the next week. Training grounds. So, no Deck Doctor, no Power Rankings. We're going straight into the training grounds. And this week is everything you need to know about Pro Tour 25th Anniversary. So, guys, let's start with the deck lists from the top 4. I'm just gonna read the decks that did well, and then we can talk about the ones that you guys want to talk about individually. So, Fireball played Blue-Black Shadow, Ironworks Combo, and Red-Black Aggro. Haruya Latin played Death and Taxes, Humans, and Red-Black Aggro. The Hot Sauce Games played Taxes, Hollow One, Blue-White Control, and I don't know the name of this team. It just says their names, but it's Stompy, Eldrazi Stompy, Humans, and Blue-White Godspharaoh's Gift. So, I know that we have a couple decks that we'll probably get really into later that are in this, but the big standouts is multiple Humans, multiple Death and Taxes, multiple Red-Black Aggro. I don't think any of these decks are the breakout decks from the Pro Tour, though. Any thoughts on that, Matt?
No, yeah, I definitely agree. I wouldn't say that these are the decks that I'm excited about from the Pro Tour. Certainly they were good decks, but I don't think any of the teams actually brought the three decks that they would bring going
Tomorrow,
forward.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, we'll obviously talk about Joshua Layton's Blue Black Shadow list quite a bit probably this episode. But one of the things that seemed really relevant, or is that a word? Is that the word I'm looking for? But one of the things that seemed really clear is that Ironworks combo got hated at this Pro Tour. Pros were talking about how there were just significantly more hate cards because people were playing things like both Stony Silence and Graveyard Hate at the same time now, where they weren't doing that before. Any thoughts on that, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general there are a lot more hate cards, and I think that's a trend we'll continue to see, maybe even expand a little bit going forward. I think graveyard decks are going to be tricky for the next little bit.
Matt, what do you think of, the fact that it seems like anytime you want to beat humans, you can beat humans, and you would think that people wanted to beat humans this weekend, but still two humans lists made the top 4 here.
Well, what I would say is that the humans got a lot better in their bad matchups. Militia Bugler really helps a lot by generating some card advantage, and there are just too many decks to hate one deck specifically in Modern, even if it's perceived as the best deck like humans can be. But honestly, you're just not going to be able to bring enough hate cards for every deck, and I think humans requires almost an overarching strategy to be good against.
Yeah, I think so too.
I agree with that. Yeah, humans requires like archetypical choices, not card choices.
I agree, and I think that one thing that pros thought about going into this is, all right, I want a deck that can beat humans that has a sideboard against the decks that I expect, and the Militia Bugler, I think, kind of caught people a little bit off guard. Not that all of the teams obviously knew about it going in, but I myself have been surprised by just how good that card has been in the streams that I've watched. Because most of my Modern right now is watching streams. I mean, you know it's coming, you know it's good, and it's just great.
Yeah, I don't remember who it was we were watching, but he was playing against Reezy in one of the rounds, and he was playing humans. And I remember looking at the game multiple times throughout that particular game, and I remember thinking that the humans player was definitely going to lose because he was playing against Blue White Control, and they were on like turn 10 or whatever. But they both had like 7 cards in hand, and I was very impressed at how well the humans deck was able to grind, and he was eventually able to actually get the win.
Yeah.
I think it was Sabrito.
No, it wasn't Sabrito. It was something Huang, I think.
Oh, so it was Hao Xuan Huang, then, one of the min card guys. I think he ended up losing that match, but he did win.
He did lose the match. Yeah, he did lose the match.
But I mean, any game where you can go to that late against Blue Eye Control with a deck like this kind of just proves the resiliency that card adds.
Yeah, it's something that probably just straight up wouldn't have been possible before.
One of the things, speaking of Tiago, that I really like from his Humans deck is actually the Restoration Angel, cutting down on some of the other effects that you might... He specifically cut a Reflector Mage from the main and put a Restoration Angel there. Rather than the 4th Mage, he has the 1 Angel. I really like that. I think that offers a lot for this deck.
Interesting. I mean, most of the lists haven't been playing 4 Reflectors recently because of the addition of Militia Bugler. But they've also mostly cut Restoration Angel from the deck, so I'm curious what slots he's cutting from the quote-unquote stock lists.
I was comparing it to the other lists in the top 4.
He's cutting the 4th Phantasmal Image.
Well,
or the first
neither of the
right. So, but your choices are the 4 Phantasmals or 4 Reflectors. So depending on what you're going to call the cut, I think that Restoration Angel was the kind of card that just
hold on,
better.
Michael, Tiago's not playing 4 of either of those cards. I'm saying.
Right. So you'd be playing 4 of one or the other unless you play.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You're saying one of those gets cut for the Bugler, and the Restoration Angel is cutting the other one. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then, I mean, what I was going to say is that I think that The main place you see it making a difference is just that people are probably not going to be playing around it now that they haven't seen it in a little bit and expect that Bugler has replaced it. So I think for a minute there when it was getting really kind of saturated as like a typical choice as a 2 of in most of the humans lists, people were probably playing around it a little bit more. And I think especially when you are playing like a very solved deck, there's a lot of value in having 1 or 2 cards that can throw your opponent a little bit.
Matt, when we look at these top 4 decks, what do you see? Like, what? I know that team tournaments, there's not too much to gain from this, but I mean, this tournament was tough. Like, this tournament was hard. Like, these decks, there's not a bad deck in this. So, I mean,
No,
well, maybe
I mean,
maybe there is one, but but like for the most part, I'm impressed with what these teams brought.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably a little bit of an exaggeration how much you can actually carry a person that's not winning any matches. I mean, it does happen in team events, but super rarely. So I would assume that most of these players in the top 4, if not all, were picking up their fair share of wins.
Yeah.
As far as the overarching decks, I think that a lot of it was what we expected. Some of it was a little bit out of left field, but they were all definitely good decks. I think the weirdest one by far was the blue-white God Pharaoh's Gift deck.
Yeah, that's when we got to what surprised me. It's like I think this deck is really, really poorly positioned.
Well, it's interesting. That's another one of the decks that at the height of Red Black, it actually boasted the second highest win percentage next to
right.
Steel Leaf Stompy.
So that's the question: is because there was so much Red Black, maybe this was a good choice. But outside of that, I don't know. Michael, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I would be more happy to play this against a Steel Leaf than Red Black. I would think.
I don't know what this deck is good against.
I mean, my experience playing God Pharaoh's Gift has always been that you're good at high rolling people. Like,
right.
Your best draws are just good.
Right. Okay.
Like more broadly than your deck is, especially anytime you make a turn 4 like Angel of Invention, it's usually good enough, and when you don't, your deck is often not good enough.
Well, let's move on really quickly to kind of the individual formats from the Pro Tour and kind of break down what we can learn from here. So I'm going to read the top 5 archetypes in the metagame, as far as like percentage of the field, that is. So we have 12 copies of Death and Taxes, 14 copies of Eldrazi Stompy, 16 copies of Sneak and Show, and 20 copies of Grixis Control in Legacy. This one's interesting. I honestly thought we would see more Death and Taxes going into the Pro Tour, Matt.
Yeah, I think it's mostly what I expected from a metagame, aside from Grixis Control, which I didn't even consider, and it was the most popular deck. It was very surprising to me.
Yeah, what
Although
specifically
I do wonder,
surprises you about that?
I do wonder how many of the Grixis Control decks are actually just Grixis Delver, because I was looking at a couple lists, and a lot of them were actually just Delver decks without, Deathrite Shaman.
Sure.
Relabeled as Grixis Control. So I'm curious what the actual list looked like that they were counting. But yeah, I just didn't expect. I expected the most popular deck to be probably Miracles, followed by Death and Taxes, and then some kind of Sneak and Show variant probably.
Yeah,
and then maybe
tied,
Black Red Reanimate.
Miracles is tied for like 13th with 2 other decks. So.
Yeah, I was surprised at how low, like something like Black Red Reanimator was. Like, it's hard to get a person on every single team that knows enough about Legacy to be willing to play something like Grixis Control against the best players in the world.
I don't know that I agree with that, and let me give you my thoughts, and I'd love to hear yours. I hate the idea that somebody would choose, like, tomorrow's the Pro Tour, where all 3 of us are qualified. Are we really gonna not play a deck that we think is the best deck because we don't want to play against LSV? Like, is that real?
Are you asking me if I would choose a higher variance deck if I thought it would give me personally a better chance of winning? I would.
But I don't think that it's true. Like, we've all played Pro Tours, and we all believe in ourselves enough to think that we can go to another Pro Tour. Michael is qualified literally for the next Pro Tour, right, Michael?
Yeah.
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 Like I am not going to the Pro Tour and bringing a worse deck because I'm not going to be as good with it. Like, no, I'm going to bust my butt and I'm going to learn that deck if I think it's the best deck, and I'm going to play it.
I think that's a little bit of a. It's a little bit of a. I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, but that's an interesting attitude to have, because there are actually excellent players that have taken decks to the Pro Tour that they said specifically they took there because they didn't want to play a real deck.
I understand. And I've heard other great players refute those players' comments. And the thing is like how many matches of Magic, Matt, do you need to understand a deck? Like, really
Understand the deck?
Yeah.
10.
Okay. And so going into Pro Tour, you like know what deck you're going to play in Legacy. How many matches do you think you would play?
Well, it depends on how fun the deck was, but probably
That's fair.
probably at least 100.
Okay. I don't know. And I could be wrong here. I'm just saying this is my newfound thing. And this is something that I realized I think it was at the beginning of this format when I was like all about ramp decks and all about specifically like Bant approach, and I was like, this deck's really fun, I'm winning with it. And then I think it was Brad Nelson top-8'd a Grand Prix with like a very sweet sideboard plan for blue-white control, and I was like, that's better than everything I'm doing. I'm just playing that tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 0 games with it. It didn't matter. I won the PPTQ, and I realized something, not from that event, but just from that mindset that I had adopted through other things, which is, if I think something is better, like, what is the reason for me not to put my money where my mouth is? And I'm certainly not saying that, you know, Black-Red Reanimator is like this high variance deck that I wouldn't have expected to pick more up. But what I'm saying is I don't like to put on players that they are afraid to challenge themselves.
Well, I think there's a time and a place, and so are you saying that you wouldn't? Is familiarity with the deck also not important? So you're just saying you should just play the best deck no matter, regardless of the circumstances?
So familiarity certainly is important, but I think that when you know that you're going to be the legacy seat at this Pro Tour,
Sure, but even outside this conversation, like I just think that if we're gonna go down that rabbit hole, you know, like then you could say that there's no reason to play the best or not play the best deck, right? Like I don't think that if you're going to not play the best deck, that one reason is better than another.
I think that I think that's not true. I think that if you're gonna do it specifically because you love a certain strategy more, like I don't get me wrong, Craig Wesco is like a great player, but he certainly plays white aggro decks way too often. Like in fact, I think that Craig Wesco is so good at Magic, had he done anything in his career other than just play white aggro decks, he might actually have a higher win percentage. That being said, I know Craig has actually like released the numbers on like when he doesn't play white aggro, and they're like pretty bad compared to when he does. But I think that that's a barrier that he needs to get over. Not just like that's a mental barrier. And I'm saying, like, yes, my win percentage with ramp and mid range is significantly higher than the other decks that I play, but that doesn't excuse me from the fact that like when tempo or aggro is the best deck, I need to learn how to play them, and I need to do it when it's correct.
I agree with that for the most part, but I would say that there's a time and a place for it, and it's not usually the Pro Tour.
I agree. I think that like trying to pick up Death and Taxes on 100 or 200 or even 500 games, you're going to get exposed.
Yeah, I was surprised.
I just don't think that's close to enough.
Sure.
I just don't think that's even close to enough. There are people who've been literally playing this deck exclusively for the better part of a decade.
How many of those players are at the Pro Tour?
Like 8?
Why does that matter then?
Because you're probably going to have to go through them. I mean, like, I think that these matchups are harder and have more depth than you give them credit for.
I think that, I mean, let's we're like all the way down the rabbit hole now. We should do a podcast on this one, because I think that I fundamentally disagree at this point, and I would be interested in your guys' thoughts, because I'm willing to believe that I'm wrong. So,
Yeah, I just don't think a month or two is enough time.
That is certainly possibly true. Leave a comment on the YouTube video, on the podcast. Let us know your thoughts. I'd love to hear them. That being said, the one that surprised me, Matt, was actually Eldrazi Stompy. As far as like the one that saw more play than I expected. Is it just me, like, or does this deck always see more play than I expected to see?
Well, so this is actually probably going back to exactly what I was talking about. Like, has nothing to do with the perception of it being, a good metagame call or anything. It's just very easy to play.
Yeah, that's true.
It hits the sweet spot, though. It's like a good deck that's easy to play that also has a lot less card availability issues.
Yeah, it's also good against Brainstorm. Like, you are good against Brainstorm on the play, end of story, and, like, that's not nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the deck is okay.
You hate the deck.
It's not as good as you think it is, honestly. That's just the long and short of it. Like, you're actually not that favored against Brainstorm decks, if at all.
Well, all right.
Like, you can definitely cheese out games with Chalice of the Void.
All right, let's be real. I think this deck is terrible. I was trying to say nice things about it. I don't really have nice things to say about it, and now Matt's attacking the only nice thing I had to say about it from what other people told me. Why don't you guys tell me why this deck was played?
Well, I think it's like Michael said, card availability is a big thing. The deck's fairly cheap to build. It's not too hard to play, and it's not terrible. It's just you're running a lot of 40% matchups. That's all.
That sounds bad.
It's not to say that you can't win. It's just not the deck that I would play if I knew what I was doing.
Is there anything down this list other than the ones that we already mentioned that surprised you didn't see more play? Elves only had 2 decks in the entire tournament. That's an interesting one.
I don't think there's a lot of reason to think Elves is basically playable anymore.
Tell me about that.
I mean, it was the deck that probably misses Deathrite Shaman the most outside of Grixis Delver, but it was a deck that was lower power level already, and if we're talking about like Death and Tax, like, Elves is kind of a whole nother level.
Of hard, yeah, that's true.
So I think it's just this is not the kind of event where Elves is likely to do well.
Okay, that's fair.
It's very much.
It's just a bad deck to casually pick up.
It's very much in the sweet spot of ridiculously difficult to play, and also just terrible against what the perceived metagame was. I think
Sure.
You're gonna have some good matchups against Death and Taxes, but it's pretty bad against Miracles and like ridiculously bad against any combo deck, especially now that Deathrite Shaman is gone.
Yeah, I think that Deathrite Shaman specifically hurt your combo matches. The thing that I was thinking is like, were your combo matches that good with Deathrite Shaman? I don't think the answer was yes. I played a lot of Legacy Elves myself, and it's not like I loved my combo matches beforehand. I was interested to see if people would pick it up after. I haven't played a game since Deathrite Shaman was banned. I thought that the place that I would be hurt was, probably specifically like, I mean, you weren't being Blackguard Reanimator to begin with, so like that one doesn't worry me as much. But I did worry about, inevitability. Just to be clear though, this deck was one of the best decks before Deathrite Shaman was printed, Michael.
So it's interesting actually. I know that. I don't know. God, I wish I knew what his real name was. I assume it's Julian something, but it's Julian on NPGO. Yeah. Anyway, he was boasting a positive win percentage against Blackguard Reanimator with his sideboard that he had at the time of Deathrite Shaman being in Legacy.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that I've ever won that match. What was his sideboard plan?
I don't remember exactly. I think he was saying that he was winning a lot of game ones with just like being on the play and having a Deathrite Shaman. I
mean, he's also probably one of
like,
the better Elf players in the world. So,
sure.
Top 5 almost for sure.
Sure. Cool. Well, let's move on to Modern. So the top 5 decks that we have for Modern are number 5, Hollow One. We have Mono Green Tron and Ironworks Tide, Blue Eye Control, and then Humans. Humans racking in 16.36% of the metagame. Let's start with the Hollow One deck. Let's be clear, why I want to start with Hollow One, and that's the Black-Red Vengevine deck we're going to talk about later. Matt, is Hollow One here to stay, or is there a new sweetness on the block?
So I remember thinking before that Hollow One was great because it's almost never going to be in a bad spot in the metagame. But I found that to not be true right now. I think it's actually in a horrible spot in the metagame going forward.
Is that because of the hate that people are bringing for Ironworks?
So I actually no. I think it's
Yeah,
going to
tell
be
me
because
about
of the hate. I think it's going to be because of the hate that people are going to be bringing for Black Red Vengevine, first of all. And also the matchup against Black Red Vengevine is
Unwinnable.
probably 70-30 in their favor,
Yeah.
which is among your worst matchups with Hollow One. Like, you don't actually have 70-30 matchups, which was one of the big appeals of the deck.
Right. Additionally, we've seen a big swing from Jeskai to blue-white control, and that matchup is substantially worse.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that.
I think that the switch to, I think we talked about it last week on the podcast, right? Like the lack of a reason to play Jeskai control. Like
Yep.
there's basically
Yeah.
none at this point.
I mean, one of the best things about Hollow One in general was how good you were against the card Lightning Bolt, and there are 0 Lightning Bolts in the mirror match.
I mean, most of these decks just don't have lightning bolts right now, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. The only deck
Yeah.
you're playing against with Lightning Bolts is Hollow One.
Yeah, and more than that, like the blue-white control lists have even gotten better against Hollow One with the addition of things like Terminus. Terminus is much harder to beat than Supreme Verdict ever was.
Well, and like sideboard Rest in Pieces, and I mean,
And
it's like
also
Certainly.
the humans deck has forced them to play more wraths and split their wraths. Like just humans actually kind of hurt Hollow One in that aspect. I think.
I mean, humans I wouldn't say is a particularly good matchup for Hollow One either. So when we're looking at, the top 5 or 6, and I'm not really sure what I'm thrilled to play against, it's just a tough sell.
Yeah, I agree.
Where is Trana in this metagame right now, Matt?
So Tron is actually interesting. Michael has a major event coming up fairly soon. Well, semi-major event. And we were talking about what he should play for Modern, and Tron was one of the things that was definitely on my radar.
What are you
I think
playing
it could.
in?
It's the
Mox
Mox.
Quarterly.
Yeah, Mox
Oh,
Quarterly.
sick.
So, yeah, I think that could be fairly well positioned right now with it having good matchups against Vengevine and any of the control decks that are coming like blue-white.
Sure.
It's obviously still bad against Ironworks, but I don't expect a lot of that, at least online. So
Sure.
Definitely.
Speaking of Ironworks, flip that. Where does Ironworks sit in the meta right now? We already talked about how people are bringing extra hate for this deck. It did not do as well as a lot of people expected going into this event.
Yeah. I think that more than anything, so we were talking about having to, play archetypically powerful strategies against humans, whereas against Ironworks, it's much more about just actual sheer volume of cards.
Sure.
And I think we saw people kind of finally find the tipping point for that, where you're playing against these blue-white control decks that often have a Damping Sphere, 3 Stony Silences, and 3 Rest in Pieces in their sideboard.
Yeah, it's a lot.
You're playing against, humans with multiple sideboard Damping Spheres, plus all the, the normal stuff. Winning Hollow One list was playing both Leyline of the Void and Ancient Grudge, in addition to sideboarded Thoughtseizes. So I think you were just really seeing, like, the number of cards on average that are being sided in against Ironworks is going up and up. And at some point, basically any combo deck will not be able to just beat just volume of sideboarding.
So, also, I would like to point out that Patrick Dickman seems to be just like on another level because he was main decking 4 ley lines for this event, according to the deck lists that were published.
Yeah, that guy also retired from Magic this weekend, so pour one out for Splendid Twin again, fam.
Is that true?
Yeah, he's done.
How interesting.
I think he hit gold and then retired, or no, he didn't hit gold and then retired.
I see.
He was like going into Pro Tours out of obligation because he kept hitting gold from Pro Tours,
Sure.
and he missed it by like 1 point, and now
Uh-huh.
he's done. So sad day for Patrick Dickman lovers. Tweet at him, tell him you love
Fair
him.
enough.
But yeah, he's done. I think that I could not have explained that better than Michael just did. I saw people switch sideboard slots that specifically have cross hate. This is something that happens a lot in Modern, where people like just are like, all right, I'm gonna play these 3 slightly worse cards, but I can also board them in this matchup and this matchup. So, you know, maybe you see more Stoning Silences, maybe you see like actual hate cards like Leyline of the Void, right? So it really depends on what people want to be doing in Modern with their 15 slots, and it was very clear that people wanted about 6 of them that they could board in this matchup. 6 to 7, would you say?
Yeah, it seems about that. But like you said, like a lot of these cards can
Right,
overlap in
they're
different spots.
cross-functional, and
Yeah.
but people started making them cross-functional to also beat this deck. Let's move on.
Yeah,
to
they're with emphasis to beat KCI, definitely.
Let's move on to the standard metagame, and the top 3 decks are in order of what I expected. Grixis Midrange at 3, Steelfish Stompy at 2, Red Black Aggro at 1. I'm not surprised at all. The next 2 decks were Esper Control, Reservoir Combo, Mono Red tied with Esper Control. Honestly, not literally any of this surprised me outside of the Reservoir Combo, but I did hear about Reservoir Combo going into the Pro Tour, so I knew that some teams were going to be playing it. But that is not the deck coming out of this Pro Tour for me in Standard, guys.
Yeah, we did test a little bit of the Reservoir combo prior to the Pro Tour, so it was definitely on Michael and I's radar as well.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by any of that. One thing that is pretty high is that 66 copies of Red Black Aggro. One thing to remember though is going into a Pro Tour that's a team Pro Tour. Just, you know, you're not gonna. People aren't just gonna let you play nonsense. People aren't gonna let you play bad decks, and in fact, a lot of them are just gonna convince you to play the best deck, right? Counter to the point that we made earlier, or that these guys made earlier, like people are gonna be like, you should just play Red Black Aggro. Like it's just very good. You should just play it. It will give us a great chance to win, and we saw that.
Yep, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, I think Red Black is like the safest deck by a lot. Like, there's something to be said. You have to really trust your testing, I think, to play something other than Red Black Aggro or like Blue White Control. One of the decks that, you know, isn't Mono Red, isn't Blue White, isn't Red Black, isn't Steel Leaf. Like, you really have to trust your testing process. And you have to get somewhere in your testing process too, right? Like, I mean, we've seen iterations of the Aetherflux Reservoir deck for a minute now, but you know, unless their testing was substantially different than the testing I did, I don't know that there's a great reason to believe the deck is especially good.
Right. Let's move away from Standard because I think that what we really want to get to is some of the different stuff. You know, whether it's the, you know, number of interesting decks, but I think the truth is that all of the formats had decks that I don't think were in our top 5 that really broke out. And I kind of regret not putting that in the show notes, but I think we're going to get to it, and if we don't, we'll cover it. So I want to start with what card impressed you most this weekend, and I would like to go first, but I actually can't remember the name of this card off the top of my head.
Can you describe it?
It's the 4-mana white card in
Palace Jailer.
It's Palace Jailer. Oh my gosh.
Wow, that was impressive, Michael. I'm actually amazed.
It was good job, Michael. No, so Michael, before I get to it, can you read it off the top of your head before I get to it?
Yeah, so it's a 4-mana 2/2 human. Maybe it has some other creature type, but basically it's a human, so you can like cast it off your cavern, which is marginally important. And when it enters the battlefield, you become the monarch, and then it exiles a creature an opponent controls until they become the monarch, or until you are no longer the monarch. I don't. In a single player or in a non-multiplayer game, they're the same.
Yeah, when it enters the battlefield, exile target creature an opponent controls until an opponent becomes the monarch. Dude, wow! This card had so much value on camera multiple times this weekend. Like, I was legitimately impressed. I thought it was super cute as, like, a one-of, and then I think Haruya Latin was playing multiples. Like, the card was just good. Like,
yeah, it's a really spicy one in Death and Taxes, and one of the things that it lets you do pretty well is like the decks that are trying to play like heavy tempo games against you, like some of the Delver style decks are often a little bit light on
Creatures.
threats.
Yeah.
Especially now that we're not really playing Young Pyromancer anymore. So a lot of these board states, like against the Death Shadow deck especially, you know, when their only creatures are like Gurmag Angler, Delver of Secrets, and Death Shadow, they often can't deploy multiple threats once you get into the mid-late game. And at least once, just the ability of the Monarch like completely ended the game, basically single-handedly.
Yeah. Matt, what about you? What card impressed you the most from this weekend?
The card that impressed me the most was probably Nexus of Fate, because I thought it was completely unplayable, and now I'm pretty sure it's broken. So
Yeah, why don't you talk about that?
Nexus of Fate, for those who don't know, it's 7 mana.
They all know now.
Take an extra turn at instant speed. If it goes to the graveyard from anywhere, you shuffle it back in. So basically, the decks are trying to effectively draw all the cards in their deck, leaving their deck very full, if not completely full, of Nexus of Fates, and then you win the game that way. So what impressed me about it was the ability for it to just like steamroll control single-handedly while also being, you know, basically unbeatable against any of the other, like the
Mid-range decks, yeah.
red-black deck and the Stompy deck. Like they just don't have a way to interact with a card like that. And it being an instant is so important against Torrential Gearhulk. Like your blue-white control opponent just like can't tap mana anymore.
Right.
And that's just a really hard thing to do when you're trying to play 6 mana, even if they're instants, right? Like it's not a favorable exchange if you're like Gearhulk Glimmer and they're like Time Walk.
Right. It's
Well, and it's not like Time Walk you get to untap first. It's like Time Walk right now, you're still tapped out. Time
Right.
Walk, Time Walk, Time Walk, Time Walk, Time Walk, Emblem's Fairy, Time Walk.
Yeah, it's Time Walk for the rest of the game.
right.
Yeah, it's
I think that's something that people don't realize is like you flash in that Gearhulk on end step, right? And you like hit that Glimmer of Genius, and they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna take an extra turn now," and they're like, "Wait, I don't have any mana." Like,
yeah, and then we
this
get to
whole
the point in the game
Gearhulk-
where you don't get turns anymore.
yeah, this whole Gearhulk plan looks really silly now that I don't have any mana. So
Yeah, what would probably surprise you if you haven't played with or against it yet, I don't think it made it onto coverage very much, but if you haven't played with or against it yet, I would say by like turn 6, usually you will be taking every turn for the rest of the game.
Yeah, turn 6 is a pretty average kill turn in my experience. Like it's not even unlikely for you to just win the game, that your opponent just doesn't get turns after the first 6 turns.
So every single person I've talked to thinks this card is getting banned. You guys have played with this card a lot. Alex and I both think it's getting banned. Where are you guys on this? I don't even think they have a choice. I think they actually have to ban it.
So,
It's interesting because they're not supposed to acknowledge the secondary market when they're considering bannings, but that's obviously what it would be banned for.
So you think if this card cost 1 cent, it wouldn't be banned?
I absolutely think it would not. I think
you're correct. I agree. I think that you're like, yeah, obviously we can't just ban this. But like at this point, it's like, yeah, these cards could be like $200 a pop in like 2 weeks. Like that could actually happen.
Yeah, they just messed up really badly. It's
so
something.
curious though,
Michael,
because
can you explain what happened for those who might not know?
so basically, Nexus of Fate is a buy a box promo that's legal in standard, but it's not actually printed in the set. So the only way you can get it is as a buy a box promo, which is creates all kinds of issues. I mean, scarcity, but also like it only exists in foil. So like Yam Wing Chun was playing the Pro Tour with a set with 4 mountains that a judge had written Nexus of Fate on as his Nexus of Fates. Which is like super awkward, especially because at some point his game plan is literally just chaining them together. So every turn he's like grab Nexus of Fate out of his deck box to it was just awkward. And I would agree that it is going to be banned, except that they seem like they spent some time trying to make it accessible on Magic Online. Or more accessible on Magic Online, which gives me some pause there and makes me think that, like, if you were just going to snap ban it, why would you go through the bother of trying to change the drop rates and adjust its price on Magic?
Which
Number?
means
I don't know what options are available.
So my initial thought was that it was going to get emergency reprinted. Like, Like we are making this an emergency promo. Go to your store, get a player reward type of repro.
They could like put it in standard showdown packs at a high rate. They
Ooh,
could
player rewards would be nice, man.
They could give it out as
Dude,
like
I
an
miss
extra
player
FNM
rewards.
promo. They could make it an additional GP promo.
Yeah.
There are lots of ways to get more copies into circulation.
Yeah.
They could reprint it in the next set.
That'd be a long ways away, though.
Well, but I don't. It would only be like another month. I mean, I don't know how much.
But I have
standard there is
no. There's standard PPTQs like or RPTQs like in 3 weeks, bro. In 2 weeks.
Sure. I don't know. I mean, there are probably some workarounds.
Let's be real.
I don't.
Let's be real. This is pay
I
to win.
can't pretend to know.
We're at pay to win now, guys. It happened.
We're at pay to win.
It happened.
We're not really at pay to win. I mean, I think that this is pretty exploitable in a lot of ways.
I agree. I think if you're
From
trying to
the
beat
other
this deck,
side.
you could beat it.
Let's
yeah,
move
I
on
think
to...
if you're fundamentally disruption focused, you know, that's a thing that you could do.
Michael, what card impressed you the most this weekend?
Well, those were two pretty good answers. I was very impressed by Snuff Out
Yeah, that was one
of the Death Shadow deck in Legacy. If you're playing against a lot of Gurmag anglers, the card can feel kind of mopey, but just the synergy like between that and the reanimates in the CFB Death Shadow list, I think like they just found ways to make their Death Shadows even better.
Yes.
And I think that like I've seen a lot of lists that like favored Dismember over Snuff Out. And one of the things about Dismember is that in a lot of formats, 1-mana removal is very cheap, but in Legacy, 1-mana removal
Dude,
is not a discounted piece to remove.
That 0-mana removal spell on camera was sweet! I was like,
Yeah.
what is this guy's getting blown out!
Yeah, I mean, you can play it around days, you can... it's just an extremely powerful effect in a deck that doesn't mind using its life total as a resource. And I think that Reanimate Thoughtseize is just sort of inherently powerful. I know that LSV said he won... I think LSV and Joshua Layton both won at least one game against Reanimator where their opponent just discarded something to hand size and, you know, they went like, land, reanimate that, thank you very much.
did that I did that personally today on Magic Online as well, right after Michael had told me this story. And I was playing the deck online. My opponent went turn 1 Faithless Looting, and I, played a Brainstorm to crack his Chancellor of the Annex effect, and then was able to reanimate his Chancellor of the Annex and won the game very easily.
It's so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the list was just really cohesive, and Legacy is in a good spot for that deck right now. Additionally, it was a very good metagame call if they expected less miracles than maybe most did, because that probably meant they would be playing against less Swords to Plowshares, which is perhaps the worst card to play against with the card Death Shadow.
So the next question we have here, I think there's a very clear 3 decks, and I'm sure that should we just talk about it was what deck surprised you the most? Were any of us not surprised by the 3 breakout decks? Can I just start there?
Yeah, I didn't expect any of these decks. I mean, the Vengevine deck we had played a little bit, so I knew it was going to be at least okay.
Michael, did any of them not surprise you?
I mean, both Death Shadow and Vengevine were decks that were on my radar to some extent. I didn't think the Vengevine deck was especially good, but I was probably just in too small of a sample still to really accurately
the
claim
Turbofog deck too, for what it's worth. We had actually considered testing a list that was probably like 10 or 15 cards off of the list that they played at the Pro Tour, but we were considering testing it right before and only couldn't because Nexus of Fate wasn't available. Yeah, it's not like we were like, this might be the broken deck and the best deck at the Pro Tour or whatever. It was like, hey, this looked kind of fun. We saw somebody playing Gift of Paradises and Nexus of Fates and it seemed kind of cool.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest thing with that, conceptually, I don't think it was quite clear to me how often you would take all the rest of the turns, because it's actually every game.
Right.
And and that didn't.
How many?
That isn't clear looking at it.
How does Sundering read?
It exiles itself. You choose a target player and a target permanent.
What is it called? Is it Karn Sundering?
Karn's Temporal Sundering. Yeah.
So that card was interesting. So so what it does is target player takes an extra turn, return up to one target non-permanent to its owner's hand. That card was kind of blowouts as I watched it cast this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I think that card is really powerful, but I think one of the actual secrets is playing as few copies of it as possible, because anytime you already have a Teferi, it's just a worse Nexus of Fate, because you can't use Teferi's mana to cast it, and anytime you don't have a Teferi, you can't cast it. So it hits this awkward spot. It looks like it might be better sometimes on paper, but when you actually play with it, it's actually more, not less expensive, and you can never cast it as like a pseudo fog.
Sure.
You have to already be winning.
So we're like a whole 2 minutes into this segment without us actually saying what the top 3 decks were. So, or the 3 decks were, and I want to just, it's blue black in Legacy for Shadow, black red Vengevine in Modern, and Turbo Fog, which is kind of a terrible name for the deck, to be honest. I guess it's a Turbo Fog deck, but like it's actually just Band Control post board. Or Bant taking turns. I don't even know what to call it, but
It's just the Teferi deck.
Yeah, it's just like. So here's the truth. For me, and why these decks surprised me. One, I already knew Teferi was the best card in Standard. I didn't know it could be better than the best card that it already was. Like, that was my biggest surprise. I was like, wait, they made Teferi more broken? Like, I didn't know that was a thing.
It definitely is, though,
Yeah.
man. That deck really makes you appreciate the power level of Teferi. It's like,
Yeah, when it's actually
wasn't
draw a card, add 2 mana to your mana pool, it's like a lot better than untap 2 lands on your untap step.
yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean,
And sometimes it's add 4 mana to your mana pool.
yeah, I was
or
gonna say, it draws with
draw
double
an extra card
dice,
with
so
Search
it's
for
like-
Iskana, or
Dude,
yeah.
like legitimately, this deck makes Teferi look like the best Planeswalker ever printed. Which
Yeah.
I've already been questioning because of Vintage and Modern, to be honest.
It's not better than Jace, but it's probably I mean, it's probably not better than Liliana of the Veil either, but it's probably third best pretty solidly.
Like, the card, like, this deck made that card look so good. One thing about Black Red is the use of 0 mana creatures in this deck is so fun to watch. It's like play this thing, get 2 zombies, kill itself, get a Vengevine. Is like, it's just sweet. It's sweet, guys.
Yeah, Stitcher's Supplier is insane in that deck. It's hard to really appreciate how good that against it yet, but that deck is extremely powerful, and Stitcher's Supplier really, really added a lot to that style of deck, because I have never played a Vengevine deck before that felt not kind of crappy, and this one feels pretty broken a lot of the time.
Yeah, it's very explosive. It's a real feast or famine deck. Like, you're mostly going to do everything that you were going to do in the game in the first 2 or 3 turns, but it's often very, very powerful. Your ability to grind is almost 0, though.
So I would say your ability to grind is limited, but your ability to bring back the same Vengevines multiple times is actually pretty high. And one of the cool things about that is that even in your draws that don't really make a bunch of zombies, a lot of the time you can get your Vengevines like bolted once or twice and just continue to bring them back. And I think a lot of that is because of Gravecrawler specifically.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of the Vengevine decks that I've played where I felt the most capable of bringing back Vengevine at will.
Yeah, I have an affinity for Vengevine, as it got me, a top, ELO rating in the state. But honestly, I'm skeptical, man. Like, it can't be as good as it looked. It can't. Like, It just looked like they were hitting the good side of variance. Were they?
Yeah, because they didn't like drop a game or whatever on camera.
Yeah, it was insane. There's
Um,
also a sweet screenshot from Matt's game earlier today in the Facebook group. So
Yeah, I think it is very powerful. It is fairly high variance though as well. I think you're going to lose probably 15% of your games or so without playing Magic. So it has to be something you're willing to deal with.
yeah, how do we feel about specifically the hate that people might start bringing to this? Like, it's like, all right, we are just playing Leyline of the Void. Like, if we're playing Graveyard Hate, we're playing Leyline, we're not losing all this crap. Is that something that scares you guys?
What I suspect is that the first go around, everybody's going to bring the wrong Graveyard Hate because they're not fully appreciating how fast it is. And they're gonna think to themselves, I can bring my Rest in Pieces, or I can bring my.
No. This is turn one graveyard stuff, fam.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not gonna work that way. And honestly, things like Grafdigger's Cage are often not good enough. Relic of Progenitus is most of the time not good enough. It actually specifically has to be Surgical Extraction or Leyline of the Void, and I'm almost not interested in anything else.
I actually am not that interested in Leyline of the Void. I'm pretty much only interested in Surgical Extraction against this deck specifically. I don't think Leyline of the Void just dies sometimes. If your opponent, wises up to the fact that this is a thing that could happen to them and decides to play a single green land at basically no cost and some Nature's Claims in their sideboards.
How much do you guys like Surgical against, something like Ironworks combo?
Not at all.
Right.
Yeah,
which is why I would lean towards Leyline of the Void.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Honestly, they're not going to be able to mulligan for their Nature's Claims. Most of them are playing. A lot of the ones that are playing green are playing Destructive Revelry actually in the sideboard, which is kind of cute. But I do think that they're not going to be able to mulligan for it actually ever. So I think it's Leyline of the Void's probably still going to win you 50-ish% of the games where you actually draw it.
Yeah. Let's talk about Legacy and the surprising deck there. We have Blue-Black Death Shadow, Throne of Geth getting a lot of Twitter hype. But what I want to know is are the players playing this Masters, or is this a legitimate part of the Legacy metagame moving forward?
Well, I just played a league with it myself and 5-0'd pretty easily, so I'm gonna say it's pretty great. I think that it will be.
Oh man, you missed the best opportunity there.
To say that you're pretty great.
I just 5-0'd a league with Death Shadow along, Joshua Layton did pretty well with it, LSV did pretty well with it. So I'm going to say that you have to be, basically perfect to play this deck.
Yeah, I don't know why I think of that.
No, but I think that, it's sort of the spiritual successor to Delver. And
makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah, I think that just, Thoughtseize is actually just good enough that when you get to abuse synergies with it, it's really powerful. And
I know we already talked about.
It felt a lot more like Grixis Delver than it did like modern Death Shadow decks.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, it looks like a Delver deck. I'm really excited to try it. But can we just talk about how sweet Reanimate is in this deck for a second? That is sweetness.
It's really good in basically every mode. Yeah, you can countersling and reanimate. You can cycle a Street Wraith and reanimate it. In the late game, it doesn't have that much of a life cost to reanimate because you can reanimate your own one drop.
The first time that I saw them cycle Street Wraith, reanimate Street Wraith, I was like, I'm so stupid. I don't even know how long it would have took me. It might have took me one game total with the deck, right? But looking at that deck list, I did not see that. I didn't see it. I didn't even think about it.
Yep.
Yeah, this deck mostly existed before when Gitaxian Probe was legal. And I probably played deck lists within 2 or 3 cards of this a bunch of times, but it was not especially good then. And I think figuring out that this lined up well against what they expected to play against is the real achievement. And I think that's true of a lot of decks at Pro Tours. A lot of the times things exist, but seeing that things are a little bit different now, or I expect this to line up well. It was a deck that lined up really well against what the metagame ended up being.
It did, yeah.
And it's really, really powerful. Lets you, you don't have to play, not to rag on Rug Delver, but, Nimble Mongoose is no Death Shadow.
Yeah, you can't rag on a rug, man. They're just different items.
I would also say that they clearly had an idea of what they expected the metagame to be with that sideboard, right? Like, the sideboard is very
Yes.
specific. It's like
Yes,
three surgical
Dread
extractions.
of Nights is
Well,
so many.
Yeah, I was gonna get to that, but like 3 surgical extractions and a spell bomb, like they're very keen on the fact that there could be graveyard decks there, and then they're playing 3 Dread of Nights and like an engineered explosives. You're like, oh man, that's
Dude,
like
So
I
we
think
we
3
had
Dread of Nights is the most I've ever seen.
it's the most I've ever seen by probably 2 Dread of Nights.
we had Josh Layton at a pre-release at Oasis Games, and somebody said that that Sam Black was like the greatest deck builder of all time, and I don't think I've ever seen a man more insulted in my entire life than Josh Layton was at that moment. Not that he
was
doesn't
pretty
think,
upset. I
not that-
forgot about that.
not that he doesn't think Sam is great. He was just like, I'm sitting, you're talking to me. Like, it was great. Yeah, I think this deck is the sweetness. I think it's for real. And yeah, it's something you should be looking at. So let's go on to Matt's favorite question, which is, what card do you feel like came out and really put in the most work? Matt?
Well, this isn't even my opinion. I know which card put in the most work.
Is it Brainstorm?
It was Brainstorm.
Dude, that's my answer
100%
too. It was
put in the most
definitely-
work.
It was Brainstorm by like such a huge margin. It's funny because like I think the last time we did this show, Mason was on, or it might have been a few shows ago. But like when I pulled these show notes up from the reactions episode and I asked some of these questions, it literally said you can't say a Tune with Ether on it. Because obviously a Tune with Ether was the answer.
Was
And
in
maybe
every
we
deck,
should have
yeah.
done that here because like it's
'Cause there's a
Oh,
correct
oh, that's why
answer.
you asked, Matt.
Yep.
Yeah, I get it.
What about you, Michael? What card do you think put in the most work that you saw that wasn't Brainstorm?
I'd probably say Teferi. So like, it was a big part of a standard deck that posted an 82% win rate at a Pro Tour, which is insane.
Right.
And Blue White had a really good showing in Modern as well. So I think just like Teferi sort of continuing to be great in multiple formats, kind of it's just impressive. It's one of those cards that like is really on the upper end of what you can spend mana wise on a card in eternal formats, but just keeps plugging along.
Yeah, it's actually the first 5-drop I can think of ever seeing play realistically in older formats, like Batterskull, but that's not
Yeah.
really 5-drop.
Yeah.
Right,
I-
it's a 2-drop.
I think that my answer, I don't know why I'm constantly surprised at how good this card is, but it's probably Bomat Courier. I'm like always like, why is this card so good? Like, it doesn't
I
do
remember-
anything.
That was basically our that's the only thing I really remember about trying to test for Pro Tour Kaladesh, that we were like, is Bomat Courier good? I think Bomat Courier is good. And then we, were like, how much of the time is this Raging Goblin versus how much of the time is it a real card? And then you ended up realizing that like we were trying to play all these like red aggro decks with Chandra, and we're like, man, Chandra kind of sucks.
But you know what's great?
Bomat Courier,
Yeah,
yeah, that card's
it's-
awesome.
Like a 2-mana windfall or a Wheel of Fortune, really.
Dude, like,
Yeah,
I'm
better than
just-
that. Only you get to draw
I
new
mean,
cards.
we've seen this card now see play in Standard, Modern, and Legacy. And it's like, I don't even know how good it is in those formats, but people really want to play it.
Oh man, that's what we should play in the Vengevine deck over Goblin Bushwhacker.
Is that good?
We broke it. We need to edit this part of the podcast out.
You heard it here
Maybe.
first,
I
fam.
think the Bushwhackers are kind of.
I think they're
Maybe
better.
I'm wrong.
Yeah.
No, I think the Bushwhackers are nonsense, but
All right. What is the sweetest thing that saw play in your opinion, Matt?
the sweetest thing that saw play. Can I say Nexus of Fate still?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Michael?
I mean, I appreciated that Vengevine went from meme deck to terror in about 20 minutes.
Yeah, it was certainly impressive. I think the sweetest thing that saw play was what is the name of the blue dude that makes Thopters?
Sigh.
Yeah,
Sigh.
that card really improved that deck. And I know that deck's like kind of nonsense still, but that's just sweet. Like, That-
So I would say that it's insanely favored against the red black decks. Like
Yeah.
we had some like mulligans to 5 where we mostly didn't play Magic and beat the black red decks pretty easily.
Yeah. So that deck was probably the one that got something that just made it sweet. So, with that being said, we're going to a Team Pro Tour. It's the 3 of us. What are we playing and
Sweet.
why in each format?
I mean,
Ship
is
it.
there any chance that we're not playing just the 3 decks we just talked about?
I think we are, right? Like,
Is there any
that's
chance
just
that anybody's not playing those 3 decks if the Pro Tour is tomorrow?
Like, it's gonna be
better
a
get our
lot of
mirror
mirror
matches down.
I
matches.
mean, I'm just gonna play main deck surgical extractions and Vengevine, whatever.
Just main deck ley lines and surgicals and just like let's get it.
Yeah, I think those.
Yeah,
are
we're hate vines.
Yeah, I think those are the 3 decks. I mean, they're a little bit interested in Blue White and Ban approach right now in Standard, but outside of that, literally, Matt Kling literally just had to confirm my opinion about Vengevine today for me to ask for Vengevines on Facebook. Like, I'm like, well, I think this deck is broken. I might actually go play in a modern PPTQ. So, all right. Well, don't forget you can check us out at patreon.com/ccmtg. Starting at $1 a month, everything that you can do is appreciated. If just every listener of the show donated $1 a month, I could just quit my job real easy, and so could these guys probably, to be honest.
Yeah. Hope so.
But even if it's just half of you did, it would legitimately change our lives forever. So just check us out, patreon.com/ccmtg. Where can people find us? So you can find me on Twitter at Spencer13H. You can find the show at CCMTG. You can find Michael at MagicMikeMTG. You can find Matt at The Witch Kling. You can tweet at us with #WhatTheBigGood. It's our Twitter program. If you tweet it, Michael will read it. You can join the conversation on the Facebook group, and you can no longer, after tonight, join in on the Discord. We are deleting the Discord as of tonight. Say goodbye to the Discord server. I don't like splitting conversations. I did the Discord because people asked. The people who asked no longer use the Discord. The same thing happened with the Reddit, where people were like, no, I like Reddit more, let us use Reddit. And so I made a subreddit. The truth is splitting the conversation just makes it so you guys can't talk to each other. And so we're going to just keep things in the Facebook group. So check that out as the Constructive Criticism family. You can join the clan by messaging me at Spencer30H or Quentin at RestrupedHURTHSTYRPE. I still get requests for this. I'm going to be honest. I don't do anything with the clan. I don't even know the point in the clan. We did it.
What does a clan do?
Nothing. It does nothing.
Well, I'm all about things that do nothing.
But you can join it, and you can also do nothing. With that being said, let's go on to #WhatThatBeGood. Michael, what is our first tweet?
Spencer tweets, does being double qualified qualify me for the next one about this RPTQ? The answer is no, but winning it will. So, do that.
I was really
That does seem
hoping
good.
I could just move
Also-
one of those qualifications.
Okay, so Adrian says, X2 another PPTQ, good for top 16, played pretty well. My friend won the event, so birthday weekend officially lit AF. Would that be good? And so the weirdest thing about this is that the next tweet with would that be good is like an account that just copied that tweet and resent it from someone else. And he's following 7 people and has 28 followers and has 1,800 tweets.
Yeah,
And
so
he just stole Adrian's tweet. I don't know what happened.
so this is one of those sweet bots. I don't know what the point in the bot is. Who follows this account?
To rip off
Oh wow,
Adrian's
there's
tweets.
all right. Don't click that. Don't click. Don't click that. Well,
That bad, huh?
I'm gonna go ahead and report this. we can move on.
All right. I mean, that made me curious.
That's a great reaction video we just had there.
Spencer tweets, sorry it was late, but last week's gameplay from Mason Clark in Construct Clash is up at patreon.com/ccmtg.
Dude, that was my favorite Constructed Clash ever.
Did you win?
I did, but that's
Was
not
it
Well,
the first time that you won?
what.
Was it the first time that you won?
No.
Second?
No.
I only watched like the first 3 of them, and I remember you were getting beat a bunch.
Yeah, I'm getting crushed. Getting crushed. No, it was Blue White versus Stompy, and it was just interesting. Like, I was surprised by a couple of things, and yeah, it was sweet. What's next?
Next, Andrew tweets a reply to a thread about people you should check out and tags a bunch of people. This made me get a lot of Twitter notifications, so it was kind of tilting. But the tweet that pops up is recommending that you should check out Autumn's streams, claiming that she once killed someone with a Mistcloaked Herald, which I've drafted Rouse Ixalan before. That happened like half the time.
Yeah, that was just
It's like one of the major ways you died in that format. It was to Mistcloaked Herald.
Well, I think the idea was that this particular Mistcloaked Herald went in for 20. I've never seen that happen.
Well, it got suited up.
Yeah, it
Maybe.
had-
Yeah, I could believe that.
That wasn't the
Notable
impression I
stuff.
got from
yeah,
the.
it's got a
from
Squire's
the-
devotion on it. It literally has a life.
Oh, it did.
link.
It did have a Squire's devotion. Okay, sure.
It's
Okay.
that is a squired. It is a squire of a knight. Like that thing clearly has a sword and is ready to battle.
It's super awkward for to have a Merfolk Knight Squire. It's just
Squire
This
a
is
confusing
clearly time for the flavor judge, Michael Hinderucker. Michael, does Squire's devotion belong on Mistcloaked Herald? Why or why not?
So yes, because it doesn't make you a squire. You are as devoted as a squire. You have the devotion of a squire. So
How
even
does a merfolk gain such devotion?
well, Thassa's hanging around too much. I don't know.
All right.
You want to also explain to me how a Squire's level of devotion gives you lifelink?
I don't know.
That's clearly the flavor
I
this whole
didn't name
equation.
every part of the card. I didn't name every part of the card. Only that anything could have the devotion of a squire. But really, Squire's devotion should make it a 1/2. Just becomes a 1/2.
Oh man! All right, here's the challenge. Next week is Flavor Week. Tweet flavor questions to Michael. Hashtag would that be good, and we will answer them. What did we learn this week, Matt?
Well, I learned a lot about the different aspects of the Pro Tour. I learned a lot about your opinions on what you should be playing at the Pro Tour, so that was interesting.
Yeah, well, I think we should do a video or a podcast on that. I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, I agree. That was an interesting conversation. I would like to continue it at some point.
Michael?
Well, I learned that we all think the same decks are.
That's one of the
Sweet, if
things
not
I learned.
good.
Like, how often does everyone on Constructive Criticism say, these are the best 3 decks?
So,
This is what you
to
should be doing.
be fair, I can tell you I will almost certainly not play Vengevine this weekend.
Sure.
I think it's a deck that is not a deck you have to beat archetypically. I can tell you that.
Sure.
For what it's worth, I would not be caught dead playing this Mox with Vengevine. That would be insane.
Yeah.
I told
Oh, yeah,
Spencer
no,
I would
that's
play
what
it.
I'm
I would
saying.
play it at a PPTQ this weekend because there's no possible chance that the paper metagame is going to adapt quickly enough.
Yeah. I agree. I assume you'll have some readers on your Vengevines.
You got yourselves a reader.
I mean, definitely on fires.
Yeah. So, what did I learn this week? I learned that I can't say something nice about Eldrazi Stompy without being called out for bullshit. Like, straight up. I don't even know if it's true, Spencer. Well, I don't believe it's true either, but I don't know what else to say. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll see you guys all next week.
Take it easy.